And then he interjected, he wants the police to know that he's nervous. That is an unnecessary statement. He's not helping, right now, to this point at least, he's not helping the flow of information. He's talking about himself. By the way, just in case you're wondering, he's very polite. He says hello to the police or hi to the police when he calls them. And he's a real rule keeper. He's a law-abiding citizen. He knows you don't call before 24 hours. But he's such a good guy that he's making the call anyway. And by the way, his fiancée is missing. He's really nervous about that. Now, someone is nervous, of course. They don't have the need to say that. Okay? So he avoids answering the question about the location. Now I'm on high alert for the location of where they were last together. That's critical information that he is withholding. So he needed to pause. He told us what she does in the present tense. He avoided the question until, instead of answering the question, he has now given us a time period, like around midnight. Okay? In fact, it's not midnight, but like midnight. The location is withheld. And then we have the reemergence of himself. He's concerned about himself. He's feeling his emotions. He has a need to talk about his emotions. What's Katelyn experiencing? Who has her? What might she be in need of now? Has she been fed? Is she okay? These are things that we expect people to say, what you and I would say if our loved one went missing. Instead, the focus is upon the caller himself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the rest of the call to either affirm this or deny it or not answer it. Then they went on to ask about the address and the issue of not being able to find her anywhere is going to be very important as we go through this. It's going to be something that's going to weigh upon the 911 operator's mind as she considers it. And so they exchange about the address and that sort of thing, but I can't find her anywhere is a pessimism that we don't expect. And it's as if to say, don't bother looking because you're not going to find her because I can't. It's just not an expectation of success. Regarding police, we expect people to be impatient, oftentimes rude, because this is an emergency situation. And we do not expect any imputation of his own emotions because he doesn't care about himself, he just cares about the missing victim. The 911 operator does not miss this. So, has he physically searched the area, the malls, the stores, the hospitals? Because this is an emergency situation. And here we go. She said, is there an address? And he said, he gave the address of it. It's fine. And she said, are you there now? Because what she heard was, he searched everywhere and can't find her. So she needs to know where he is also. So it's kind of a natural question because he's communicated that he's been searching everywhere. And he says, which is a pause, I'm heading out there now. I have been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go by her house to see if she's okay, and her car's still there. She would be at work right now with her car, which is why I'm really freaking out. So he said, I'm heading out there now. I have been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go to her house to see if she's okay. He's talking about dropping by. This is casual language. This is not someone who has been searching, because in fact we later on learned that he can't find her anywhere. He didn't do any searching. He made that statement without doing any searching. She's going to get to that. But he gives this really casual, just trying to get a hold of her. Wait a minute, I thought you were trying to find her. Now you're just trying to get a hold of her. That's a change of language. A change of language represents a change of reality. This is an emergency situation. He should be pressing and showing that urgency about where he has tried to find her, whatnot. But he's heading out there now. And what we look at with the word like, and this is common habit of teenagers, it's like warm outside and I'm really tired. It's a slight distancing language that can be habitual, especially for teens, but we call it a reduced commitment. If I said to you, my keys are locked in the car, or I locked my keys in the car, It's a very firm statement. It's very likely to be true. If I said, I believe I locked my keys in the car, I have weakened the assertion to allow that maybe I didn't. It's appropriately weak. Or I think I locked my keys in the car. I really like, maybe possibly put my keys in the car. I'm beginning to reduce my commitment to something. So what does he reduce his commitment to? To searching, to his contact with her. He's stopping by the house to see if she's okay. Wait a minute, if you've searched for her everywhere, you don't think she's okay, you wouldn't be stopping by her home casually. This is an incongruous statement where the context of emotions is not matching the language. If he's really freaking out, if he's really nervous, then we should see that in the words. You wouldn't be stopping by trying to get a hold of her. We look at this as script building. And then he has the need to explain to them. He said, I'm heading out there now. I have been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go by her house. He said, I decided to go by her house to see if she's okay. He didn't say going to her home, to her apartment, to her house. He's going by it. There's the casual language. Interesting, he said, I decided. When do we use the word decide? When there's a debate. Would there be any need to decide to go? If you've been searching everywhere and you can't find her anywhere, you would now need to come to a decision to go to her house? But he doesn't tell us that. He said, I decided to go by her house. And you say, well, that's just one small word. The law of economy says that the shortest sentence is best. When someone gives an additional word, it takes an additional effort because it has additional meaning. And that's what he's doing. He wasn't going to her house to search. He was just going to go by it. And he said, her car's there. She would be at work right now with her car, which is why I'm really freaking out. Not I'm freaking out, or not even really freaking out, which has a higher level of emphasis, which we say, why would you need to emphasize your emotion anyway? It's a missing person. But he's only really freaking out. He doesn't say he's freaking out. So, are you there now is a yes or no question. He avoids answering the question. Because it would just be a natural something that you'd be there because you've been searching everywhere and you can't find her anywhere. So we have the continued theme of deception where someone sounds like they're searching, but they're not. Sounds like they have a need to persuade us that they're really nervous because they're not. Okay? He decided to go by her home to see if she's okay. That is something where someone anticipates being asked, well, why are you going to her house? Okay? He has a need to explain that. And then we have the emotions in the statement again. So we know carefully the location of the statement of emotions, where they're located in a statement, because it's natural to be frightened. Anyone would be scared out of his mind. But why would you have a need to state that? It's not even necessary. He is continuing to focus upon himself and not the victim. By the way, who is missing? According to the statement, it's his fiancée. Who? I don't know who it is. He hasn't used her name yet. That's distancing language. So he went from being really nervous to now really freaking out. Okay? And he feels the need to explain why this emotion is there. There's no necessity to explain why someone would be nervous at this point. This is becoming very sensitive. What this is indicating to me is what we call artificial emotion and artificial placement of emotion. I believe that he's really nervous, and I believe he's freaking out, but I believe what he's telling me, and he's talking about himself. This call so far has been about him, who he is, his name, and his emotions. All I know about the victim is that her relationship to him is fiancé, but that's all I know. I don't know what she looks like. I don't know what she's going through. I don't hear any concern for her. I don't even know her name at this point. So the 911 operator then has to ask, what's her name? He had to be asked to give her name. I cannot imagine getting through this far in information without saying who it was that's missing. but he was able to do that. So he says, Katelyn Helene Markham. That's all he said. He gave the full and proper name. So the 911 operator is thinking about his commitment that he can't find her anywhere, but he's going to stop by her house. So she said, have you called the hospitals or jails or anything? Because he can't find her anywhere. So now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. It's a pretty, someone that says, I can't find her anywhere, that's a very firm and strong statement. So specifically, have you called the hospitals, jails, and the operator gives herself away. She says, or anything, because she doesn't believe him. Because it certainly doesn't sound like someone is giving me the flow of information to identify and find Katelyn. Anything? And so we have another question that he doesn't answer. He says, and that's it, nothing else. So the 911 operator, and this is, I tip my hat to her. She knows that he did not give the location where he last saw her. He gave the time, but not the location. So the 911 dispatch says, where was she at midnight last night when you last saw her? This was a great question. It was unnecessary, and it should not have been asked. And this is where you see the 911 operator, she's listening. She is listening to this man's words. And she recognized he ducked the question. He ducked the question about anything, jails, hospitals, anything. His non-committal words, his casual expressions of going by her house. So she adds, have you done anything? So where was she at midnight last night, using his time period, when you last saw her? So at this point, she is his fiancée. She has no name until he finally gave the full name. And the expectation is that he's going to say, we were at her house. And the word we is something we look at as intuitive and something very important in analysis. It's a very powerful pronoun. In fact, I can prove to you how powerful this pronoun is. If I were to ask you or anyone in the audience, I want you to think of a true story. And I want it to be many years ago, 20 years ago. And it has to be true. And I want you to picture in your mind what your story is going to be, and then tell me your story. It is very likely that you're going to answer me knowing whether you should use the word we or the word I, whether you were alone or whether you were with someone else. Without even stopping to think, say, should I use we because I was with someone else, or should I use I because I was alone? It is intuitive. Pronouns actually predate speech. The international symbol of possession from a little toddler for mine is this with the hand. My dada, my baba, even before they can speak my. We are possessive creatures by nature. This is my pen. This is my fiance. Okay? The word we shows unity and cooperation. It shows plural. First of all, we were together. But it shows unity and cooperation. In fact, we use it in sexual assault cases. So if someone says, we drove to the woods and he raped me, and then we drove home. If the word we is used after the sexual assault, it wasn't a sexual assault. Because the rape victim will never use the word we in correlation with her and the rapist after the rape has taken place. It's a signal that it's a deceptive statement. It's that powerful. I was asked to join into a organization that was trying to free Dennis DeShane of Maine, who had been convicted of killing 13-year-old Sarah Cherry many years ago. And I was given the information about the case, and I had the transcripts of the trial where he took the stand in his own defense. He said he was on drugs, and he was in the woods, he had gone fishing, he was by himself, he got lost, but he had never met the little girl that was found murdered. And he was alone the whole time. So I said I would look it over, and a private investigator had given me just an abundance of reasons why he was innocent. And I said, yeah, I'll take a look at it. Within the first few minutes of the transcript, when he took the stand, it's right where I went to, when he took the stand, tell us what happened. At one point he said, I was admiring the deciduous trees, and we were losing daylight, so I got up. And when he said we were losing daylight, the prosecutor said, Mr. Deshane, who is we? And the defense called for a recess, and they huddled overnight, and the next morning they came back and said, we, meaning all of us, we were all losing daylight, even though he was alone in the woods in Maine, and the jury didn't buy it. I gave back the information to the private investigator and said, you're looking at a guilty man. Pronouns do not lie. He was not alone. That's how powerful they are. So where were you when you last saw her? I expect him to say, we were at her home. Because that's what he led me to believe if I interpret his words. I don't interpret, I listen. Where were you? Question is, where were you, John Carter, the caller? I'm sorry, where was she at midnight when you, John Carter, the caller, last saw her? So I expect to hear, we were at her house. He said, she was at her house. She was going to bed. She wasn't going out to do anything, so she wouldn't have been in her bed. I mean, I've been with her 6 years. She's not deceiving, you know. She doesn't. So the first thing I notice is that he doesn't use her name. It's a psychological distancing from her. He doesn't use the pronoun we to connect himself and Katelyn. He tells us where she was, but nothing about him. He tells us what she was intending to do, not what she did. She was going to bed. Then he says she wasn't going out to do anything. So he introduced to us in the negative. What we look for people to do is tell us what happened. When someone tells us what didn't happen, what wasn't thought, what wasn't said, instead of what did happen, what was thought, what was said, it's called a negative. What someone tells us in the negative is more important than what someone tells us in the positive. So he's telling us what she didn't do. But you have to ask, how would he know that? And he doesn't say we were at her house. Then he said, and I mean, I've been with her for 6 years. Not I've been with Katelyn. Not Katelyn and I have been together for 6 years. Not even we have been together. I have been with her for 6 years. The word with, when it is between people, indicates distance. I could say, Heather and I went Christmas shopping. Or I could say, I went Christmas shopping with Heather, putting Heather and I at opposite ends between the word with, meaning distance. The distance could be anything. It doesn't have to be nefarious. It can be psychological distancing where I didn't want to go shopping, something that simple. But it is distancing language. The fact that thus far he hasn't uttered the word Katelyn other than the formal stating of her name is not expected from a fiancé. So I'm kind of on alert for this now. And now we have the distancing language. And then he says something else. He tells us what she wasn't going to do, as if he knew her intention. He said, she's not deceiving, you know. He introduced deception into this 911 call. That's not expected. And he stopped himself. It's called self-censoring. He stopped there. He didn't want to go any further. But in introducing something in the negative, he's calling our attention to a topic. And the topic he's associating is with Katelyn, and the topic is deception. So he's now made us think of Katelyn and deception together. That's a negative. So he did not use her name. He did not use the pronoun we. This is affirming to me the distance in the lack of introduction, the social introduction that began with. So we have to consider he's engaged to the person who's missing. That means he should be on high alert, well familiar with the last moments together. We were together. Over and over in his mind, he'd be thinking about those last moments together when he last saw her. You wouldn't sleep at night thinking about these last precious moments. He avoids it. He avoids it. In fact, I call this extreme distancing due to the context. The avoidance of her name, other than when he was forced to by the operator, given the fact that A, she's missing, and B, she's his fiance, he's telling us this is a problem relationship. He can't even use her name. It's a psychological distancing that's become extreme now. So she wasn't going out to do anything. You might want to consider, what was anything that he wanted to do to go out? Did she refuse to go out? I mean, police need to know. This sounds like an argument to me. The operator senses argument as well. And the operator says, okay, and this is not a way to word a question, but she said, and you guys didn't have an argument or anything? And he says, not at all. Instead of no, not at all, which gives, in the negative, a greater emphasis. He gives an emphasis, but then he says nothing else. At this point, I think it's fair to say, this is not a call of someone really helping to facilitate information. He said he couldn't find her anywhere, but then he couldn't identify a single place that he looked. He avoided saying where he last saw her. He had to be asked again. And then he went to her house and immediately off into things that she wouldn't do. And then he introduced the topic of deception. When someone goes missing, and you picture this for your own loved ones, when someone goes missing, the only thing we can concentrate is on the wonderful things about them. We miss them terribly. We're scared out of our minds for them. We don't need to persuade anyone that I'm afraid. I'm afraid. No need to persuade the police, unless, of course, there's a need to persuade. Okay, is she on any medications or anything? And that would be a simple no, yes or no answer. But again, the emphasis, not at all. And so I would, at that point, consider I need to explore for not only psychotropic medications, but marijuana or any possible substance abuse in this relationship, in the dynamics of him calling and mentioning what he has mentioned thus far. Because it's a simple yes or no question. He went to not at all, which is emphatic. Has she had thoughts of suicide or anything like that? He said no, then, which should end it there. Then he went to never. Then he went to the word I, the pronoun I, and then he went back to never. This is a self-censoring, and he's literally tripping over his own pronoun there. No, never, I, never. And whatever he was going to say, he broke off the sentence, which tells us his missing information. He could have stopped at no, but he continued to go. So I think we're now having some form of distancing language where he is psychologically depersonalizing the victim. He's not using her name. The 911 operator is in the place of having to go fishing for information. Okay? He already identified that he couldn't find her anywhere, but upon further questioning, we got no indication that he did check the hospitals or any place else. So then she asks, because you have to put yourself in her shoes as well. Here's a guy that said, I can't find her anywhere, but she can't identify a single place he's even looked. And he's casually stopping by her house. He said, all right, have you talked to her mom or anybody like that to see maybe she's out shopping or something? I mean, that's like simple stuff. He said, I called her father. The only thing that's not there is her cell phone, which is positive, but she's not answering it. So, and the Sacred Heart Festival is going on right up the street, and there's a lot of questionable people there, and it just kind of, I'm sorry. So this answer is what we call pregnant, with a lot of new information for us. You've noticed that I mentioned before we began that statements, 911 calls in domestic homicides that begin with a greeting are often end up being guilty caller status. I also then mentioned that 911 calls in domestic homicides that use the word I'm sorry, the words I'm sorry, also fall into that same category. This is where he's thinking, for whatever reason, he needs to be sorry. Now, he could be sorry that she's missing, or sorry that he interrupted the operator, or sorry that he's in this situation himself, but thus far, I've not heard anything about Katelyn. She's missing from this call. There's no description of her clothing, her attributes, anything. He then introduces a red herring. He now has given them some suspects, which don't include him. because he's a good guy. He keeps the rules. He's very polite to police. He wouldn't even call, but except he's such a good guy that, I know you're supposed to wait the 24 hours, but I'm doing it anyway. And he's also sorry. And I'm listening to him. He says there's a lot of questionable people there at the Sacred Heart Festival. So he's now giving them to think about that. But he was asked, have you talked to her mom or anyone like that? And he said, I called her father. The next thing I expect to hear is, well, what did dad say? What did mom say? What did other people say? Instead, he went to something that he needed to tell them. He needed them to know the only thing that's not there is her cell phone. Now, what does that mean? The only thing that's not there is a cell phone. Has he inventoried everything in the house already? Has he gone through the house and knows the only thing that is missing? Cell phone? So he's introduced cell phone statistically. When someone brings in the free editing process, cell phone or phone, there's a statistic correlation between that and placing the person at the crime scene. So now you should be on the alert, because he wasn't asked what was still at her apartment, what did she have on her, what was she dressed like, anything. He hasn't asked those questions, and he hasn't offered them either. But he has offered her cell phone. So you must be on alert. We must be on alert for something about the cell phone that will be part of a script. So we're listening. Is something he's going to do with this cell phone, because it's important enough for him to mention in a 911 call. It's important enough for us to listen. So he concluded with the words, I'm sorry. Okay. And then she said, okay, well, we'll go ahead and have someone meet you there. What kind of vehicle are you going to be in? And this is kind of, to me, almost a little bit comical. He said, a 2008 Ford Focus. It's red. I know more about his car than I know about Katelyn. I know about his vehicle's color. I don't know anything about Katelyn because he made it through this call without using her name once, except when he had to. That's psychological distancing language. He's given me indications that he's lying about searching. And she caught him in that lie. He hasn't searched. And he refused initially to give the location of where he last saw her. And then when he finally did say she was at her house, he didn't say that's where I saw her or that's where we were. She was there. I believe that's true. But he didn't say that that was the last place he saw her. He didn't use those words. The operator did. He is giving short answers and limiting his answers. He's not working to facilitate information. So this is his 911 call. He ends with, okay, bye-bye. He's very polite. And my conclusion is that he is deceptively withholding information about what happened to Katelyn when he made this call. He has a need not only to withhold information, but he has a need to portray himself as a good guy. We call this ingratiating, where someone has a need to ingratiate themselves to police. When a child goes missing, for example, people are urgent. And if the police don't find my child or my fiance or anyone, they failed. I'm not going to praise them for not finding her, unless I want to praise them for not finding her, because I didn't want her found. He is, in measuring the number of words focused upon Katelyn and the number of words focused on himself, it is off the charts. This call's priority is about himself, his feelings, what he knows, what he's done, and in the sense what he hasn't done, and not about Katelyn. I have very little information about Katelyn. The only thing I know about her is that she's missing and her relationship to him, my fiance. And then he mentioned the phone, which is going to become important. So when we get to the point of text messages or calls, we need to be on the alert that he already telegraphed something so important about that cell phone before we get to the second interview, which is the radio interview. He is deceptive about the last time he saw her alive. He expresses no concern for Katelyn while he highlights his own emotions. He is deceptive about saying that he searched everywhere for her. And he is also very concerned about how he is perceived by police rather than show actual concern for Katelyn. So my conclusion of the 911 call is that he has what we call the status of a guilty caller. It doesn't mean he killed her. He is deliberately withholding information because he knows what's happened to her. He knows what happened to her, and he's suppressing that information. 6 days later, he gave an interview on radio, and what we look for now is the conclusion of the 911 call of guilty status. Will that be upheld by the radio? Or will he say, I didn't kill Katelyn, I didn't do anything, I didn't harm her, I didn't cause her disappearance. You're nuts, something's wrong with you. You need to look at the wrong place. I mean, you're looking at the wrong place, you need to look elsewhere. I didn't harm her. Or will he continue to affirm a bad relationship with her and withhold information? Now, this is critical. If my premise is correct, that he is a guilty caller, he has guilty knowledge of what happened to Katelyn when he made this call. If his avoidance of using her name is correct, that it means he is psychologically distancing himself from her, we need to look for something else. What people do with guilt is they seek to justify it. He will need to find ways to insult her, to blame her, to justify her death, if he has that guilty status. If he talks about my fiancée Katelyn, and that he loves her, and that he's concerned for her well-being, that's the expected. That would be in contradiction to my analysis conclusion, and I would be very happy to say, hey, my conclusion was wrong. Okay. It seemed on a 911 call that it was a guilty status, but it's not, because here in the interview he made it very clear his concerns for her, his reliable denial. He did not cause her disappearance, he did not harm her in any way. He's being truthful and honest, and he speaks about her as anyone would speak of a loved one. And then I'm wrong about my analysis. Or the analysis is going to be a